Welcome to Sing Smart Class 2. Today we will discuss music notation. I hope you have your textbook, and I have several handouts that you should have downloaded or printed. Number 4, number 5, number 6, and the download for number 7 is actually in your textbook. So if you have your textbook with you, you can get away with not having that one. Let's begin. Your text poses the question of the day. If you had to describe the sound of a note on paper, how would you go about it? Think for a moment. It's difficult, isn't it? The notation that we use evolved over many centuries. It truly accomplishes an essentially impossible task. It represents the sounds, shapes, emotions, and patterns which can be made in music. It is amazing to realize that a couple of measures of manuscript can indicate rhythm, pitch, volume, dynamic variation, attack and release of a tone, and phrasing. When an experienced musician looks at a score, he can instantly create the sound that the composer is seeking. In efforts to minimize the space on a score, symbols and abbreviations have become prevalent. During the Renaissance, Italy dominated the artistic world and the musical world. Thus, the Italian language was chosen by musicians to be the common language. I'm not sure it was chosen. I think it just evolved. But what this did is it made musical directions the same worldwide. Now, I have to tell you that you'll find in the back glossary of your book some German terms and some French terms. But when you expect the Germans and the French to put their own in instead of using the worldwide accepted ones? Oh well. The basic idea of musical notation is that vertical dimension on the page represents pitch. Horizontal dimension on the page represents time. I'm going to say that one more time for you because I think it's very important. And I've broken this class down basically into that. Vertical dimension on the page represents pitch. Horizontal dimension on the page represents time. Let's begin with the horizontal. There are 2 sets of horizontal lines, 5 lines in each set, with a fragment of a line between them. The fragment line is called a ledger line. In early times, music was indicated by high and low on some form of a graph. As notation developed, it became clear that our brain could not formulate exact pitches from a huge graph. So 5 lines per staff evolved, removing the 11th line in the middle for visual purposes. It became the C line, or the middle C. Middle C, as we call it, I hate to tell you, is not the middle of the piano. Middle C is middle C because it's the middle of the grand staff. And I'm going to show this to you in just a minute. Let's find that sheet. Here it is, right here. Here's the grand staff. The 5 lines create 4 spaces. 5 lines create 4 spaces. Your little ledger lines for this imaginary line that's been removed. You can also add ledger lines above or below. Here is the middle C. If you happen to fold this up in exact half and get your lines lined up, you will see that middle C is middle C. You will see that the bass clef C is on the second space up. You'll see that the treble clef C is on the second space down. You'll see what I call double ledger C, high C, is on a double ledger. You'll also see, sort of, that double ledger C on the bottom is a double ledger on a line note, and it's C. This is the only note on the staff that is a mirror image all the way through notation. So this is called the grand staff or the great staff, and it's all hooked together. There can be multiple lines, there can be 6 or 8 lines. Sometimes if there are multiple lines, you'll have brackets connecting those lines, and we call them systems a lot of time instead of the grand staff or lines. But you need to know this is your basic pattern. Moving on. Another reason for the development of the grand staff, as we know it, was because the 5 lines which created the 4 spaces could just about contain all of the notes of a vocal range. The goal was to keep as many notes as possible on the staff for each vocal range. Ledger lines can extend above and below, and they are used as needed. But the basic, at one point, each vocal section had its own staff and would read from that staff. So I'm going to draw a treble clef somewhere, or maybe I don't have to. Here's one right here for you. I'm going to draw a treble clef. Originally, this came from a G, a fancy G. Not any G that I ever wrote or was taught to write, but that's a G. Somehow, this last little curve, I make a straight line, come backwards, and there's a little curve. It doesn't always make a complete circle, but that little curve should be on the second line up in the top staff. That is a G line. It's called a G clef. It's called a treble clef because treble voices sing in that clef. Or it's also called, believe it or not, a soprano clef because it was written for soprano voices. Altos had their own clef as well. And interestingly, the viola in the orchestra plays in the alto range. The viola in the orchestra still plays from an alto clef, but altos don't sing from an alto clef anymore. I'd say thank goodness almost. But they don't sing. They have to sing from the treble clef with the sopranos and often do go below the staff into the ledger lines. But I have to tell you, it makes it easier for choir directors when we say, sopranos sing with the altos on that phrase, or altos sing with the sopranos, that you're not changing clef along the way to try to figure out what you're doing. So there's some good in everything. Basses have their own clef, and this clef was developed to keep the basses on this staff, basses range on this staff. This is called the bass clef or the F clef. Now I have to tell you that every book I've ever read about the bass clef indicates that the bass clef is identified by these 2 little dots over here. And they point to the F line, which is this middle line right here. That's a fat middle line, but that's okay. I'm a little chubby too. So these 2 dots point to the F line. I think that's ridiculous, but that's the rule, okay? I teach that this little curly Q that begins part of this F clef, which also was an F letter at some point. I don't know how that was an F, but that's okay. And this little thing is always on the next to the top line. That's an easier spot for me to teach children that that's an F line, and that's an F clef. But the truth is, the 2 little dots are supposed to identify that. But the bass range generally falls on this clef. Now we get to the poor tenors. They used to have their own clef, but now they use the treble clef. Tenors read an octave lower than what is notated. There is often, but not always, a tiny little 8 written under the treble clef. A tiny little 8 you can hardly see, which tells you the octave lower and that tenors have to sing with that. But it's not always there. Sometimes tenor parts are notated on the bass clef. I have even seen clef changes for the tenors on page turns. Yikes. This is a note for all of us. When you get ready to turn a page and you've figured out that the next page changes clefs or goes into 4 parts and which one is mine, on one clef, 4-part women or 4-part men, it's helpful before you turn that page, write the note at the bottom of your page so that you're aware and prepared for the next page turn. But poor tenors, you've got to be kind to tenors because they have the toughest clef to read and it's not even consistent. When 2 voice parts, say tenor and bass, or alto and soprano, share a staff, and this happens in scores sometimes, the stems will indicate the voice part. Stems go up on the right and down on the left. Now, you need to understand that. You need to put that in your head because this happens in our scores frequently. And somewhere I drew this. Here we go. So this is confusing because this is a soprano part and an alto part. Now, who sings what note? I can't tell you how many times in rehearsals that question has come to me. And I have to stop and think. But here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a soprano, your stem goes up, and it goes up on the right. Do you understand that? You're a soprano, so that note is yours. Do you see that? That note would go up. If this was a tenor bass line, or whatever notes these would be, G and A, this would be the tenor line with the stem up on the right. The alto line, because if you didn't realize which side, that alto note could go up on the left. Well, that looks kind of strange to me, but maybe not to you. But the alto stem goes down. And I would suggest when you're singing this, you take your little pencil and you scribble the other one out so you can find your pitch. Use a pencil, not a pen. Always have your pencil. That's a confusing thing, and as a choral singer, you need to understand that. It will save 3 minutes of time in a rehearsal, not having to answer that question. I'm moving on to the vertical dimension. Vertical dimension represents pitch. Some musical notes or pitches are high and some are low. It's not obvious why we use these words or why we feel such a strong association between pitch and height. The idea may come directly from the human voice and the experience of singing. We won't do this in this room, but try this when you're home. Hum a low note, a very low note, the lowest note you can reach, and then slowly slide the pitch up to the highest note you can reach. Try to be aware of the music inside your body and try to feel where it is resonating. You will feel the low notes located somewhere in your chest or in your body core, and the high notes located toward your head or the back of your head or coming up over your head, hopefully. This is partly an illusion, since the part of you that's making the noise is not moving through your body, but you're making different bits of your body resonate, and that's probably what you're feeling and how we've come to just associate low and high that way with our body. The musical alphabet. I hope most of you know this by now, but if you don't, it's time you learn it. A through G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's important to be able to say this backwards. G, F, E, D, C, B, A. It's important to be able to say it in skips. A, C, E, D, F, A, E, G, B. You must be able to do this backwards and forwards. It's your responsibility to learn that. It's not real hard. Do it in the shower. Do it while you're driving around town. Another easy thing I'm going to teach you is the difference in a line note and a space note. I think I drew this out somewhere. Yes. When you go to elementary school and they tell you to write your name on a line, here's the line, N-A-N-C-Y. Y is the only thing that really crosses that line. But that's on the line to a child or to someone that really doesn't read music. That's on the line. That's not how musical notation works, okay? So in my theory class, they laugh at me. But are you ready? You'll never forget it. This is the note, right? Line note, space note, line note, space note, line note, space note, line note, space note. Will you ever forget that? It's okay if you forget it, but don't forget what a line note looks like and a space note looks like. That's enough of that. Notice in your text, page 67 and 68, there are mnemonics to help remember the names of the notes. Now you're going to get my opinion on this. I will tell you this. Treble clef spaces, F-A-C-E, face, right? Treble clef lines, every good boy does fine. Bass clef spaces, well, there are several you can choose from. All cars eat gas, the first letter of each. All cows eat grass, first letter of each. One of my students about a year and a half ago created all chickens eventually get barbecued. That's my favorite, actually, and it takes you up to the B as well. Okay? The lines. Who knows what the line notes are, the bass clef? Good boys deserve fun always. That's kind of antiquated. How about grizzly bears drink fuzzy ale? I like that one. Here's what I'm going to tell you. You need to learn 2 of these. You need to learn 2 of these. And what I'm going to say is to learn the space notes. Learn the space notes of the treble clef. Learn the space notes of the bass clef. Surely you can add 1 letter or subtract 1 letter and find out what note that is. I know you can do this. I've even heard because I'll tell students that. And they still get them mixed up. They'll do F-A-C-E on the bass clef. So here's the other part of my little cheat. Your face is at the top of your body. Face, the word F-A-C-E, goes up on the treble clef, the upper clef, the upper sound, the upper body, the top one. That's the treble clef. That's the bass clef. The treble is face, just the space notes. If it's one note higher than F, you already know G because you know G clef. But if it's one note higher than A, it's B. A, B, C. Hello, I think we can handle that. The bass clef, whether you choose all cows eat grass, all cars eat gas, or all chickens eventually get barbecued. I like that verb. All of those walk on the ground. Cars are on the ground, chickens are on the ground, cows are on the ground. It's the low part. It's the bass clef. It's the lower staff. You got it? Don't forget it. It's just that simple. Now, handout number 4. We need to talk about the piano some. And I have this that I can show you. Let me make sure I'm not skipping something here. Yes. Handout number 4. Here's what I'm looking for. Handout number 4 is a copy of the keyboard. Your text has a copy of the keyboard, but I extended it all the way down. The reason I extended it all the way down is because if you don't play the piano, I'm not trying to make you pianist, but if you don't play the piano, you can be able to name any note on this piano by one little trick. Do you see that we have groups of 2 black notes, then 3 black notes, then 2 black notes, then 3 black notes, then 2, all the way up a keyboard. But the very first, at the very lowest part of a keyboard, there's only 1 black note. And the reason that is because that starts the letter A. Now your book doesn't show all of this, but you need to know it would be beside the 1 black note right here. That's actually a group of 3 because it goes 3, 2, 3. It's actually a group of 3 black notes and in one. That is letter A. So if you can identify that, now I have to tell you, these little electronic keyboards do not always start this way. You need to be on a real piano. But that's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If I told you to come find an F, all you have to do, A, B, C, D, E, F. That's what an F looks like. Go find some more Fs for me. Fs for me. Fs for me. Now you know how to identify a note on the staff now as what letter it is. Now you need to be able to identify it on some instrument. And I would say the piano is probably the easiest one. That way you can get a little piano app on your phone, can't you? And so you could always do this, but you need to know that. You need to be able to identify a note as an F. When we get into sight singing more, you're going to be able to say, here's an F. I can start on this pitch. You don't need to know any more than that. But and any F will almost do. It's just a different octave, and you can find a range that works for you. Where am I? Whole steps in half. Music of the Western world is made up of 12 different tones, equally spaced from each other. The smallest unit of distance between 2 tones or 2 notes is called a half step or a semitone. Now I want to use, and I'm not sure the best way to show you, if you can see this little piano over here, I'm going to take and cover up the white notes on the bottom. And I'm doing that because the way notes are spread out on a keyboard instrument, you have 2 white notes, a black, a white, a black, 2 white notes, black, white, black, 2 white notes, black, white, black, 2 white notes, black, white, black. Do you see what happens? When you look at a keyboard and you see only the white notes, you can't determine where the whole and half steps are. But if you only look at the top of the keyboard from this level up, you can see where the whole steps and half steps are. 2 halves equal a whole. The closest one is a half step. It's just that simple. These are all half steps. Half step, half step. If you count, there are 12 between this A and that A, including every pitch. Okay? Those are whole steps and half steps. I covered the white notes. You already know this. Let's try to sing half steps up from C to C. I will play them once, and then I want you to listen to them. They don't sound like anything but a chromatic scale, but and they will go down. I would say that's a good exercise to do in the shower as well, because just singing half steps is not as easy as you think it is. So sing with me this time, and then sing it at home by yourself. Ready and go. La 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 la. Down. La 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 la. And it's easier with the piano, let me just tell you. I won't do it for you because I would be embarrassed. But you should be, as singers, should be able to do that beautifully. And if you can't, work on it. Get to work on that. To indicate half steps in the score, sharps and flats had to be invented. I'm going to draw a sharp, or maybe I drew a sharp over here for you. And I don't want to miss something, but here is the sharp, and it looks like a tit-tat-toe. It's very easy to draw, but there are times that I have people see in a score a sharp in a cluster of notes and say, well, which one does the sharp go to? I don't know which one the sharp goes to. The middle of the tit-tat-toe, right there. Do you see it right there? The middle. That's on a space right here. Do you see that? If it were here, the middle of the, oops, I don't draw very well. The middle of the tit-tat-toe is on a line now, but if it's on the space, the middle of that tit-tat-toe indicates which note it's on, whether it's the space note or the line note next. If you sit on something sharp, are you going to go up or down? Up. So a sharp goes up a half step. Up a half step. Sometimes you're going up a half step from a white note to a white note. Hello, that can happen. It's difficult to look at one and sing an E sharp and sing an F, but that's what's required. The next one I want to talk about is a flat. It looks like a B sort of. But this little hump of the B is where the note is indicated. It's not the center of this, it's the little hump of the B. So if that right now is on a space right here, so it would be that note. If the hump of, whoops, try that again. If the hump of the B was on this line, that's a pretty fat line. If it was on that line note, then it would be the line note right there. So you need to know this. This is called a natural, and it cancels and brings back to the white note. Now we also have to talk about, let's see if there's, did I write this down somewhere for you? Yes, right here. There's something called a double sharp and a double flat. We're talking about sharps going up a half step. This is a double sharp, it looks like an X, and it takes you up 2 half steps. So how confusing is that? If you know what an F looks like, F sharp is a black note, and then if it's a double sharp, you go up another half step. It's not called a G. There are grammatical rules in music theory, just like there are in English composition. You write a term paper, you have to have a subjective, I'm going to screw it up. Whatever, to write a paragraph, you have to have your main topic, and then you have to have support. All that stuff, periods, commas, the same is true in music. So this is F, F sharp, F double sharp. You sing a note that looks and sounds like a G. That's called enharmonic. It means it has multiple names. That G is called G. It's called F double sharp. It's called A double flat, because we're going down to the flats. Anyway, you need to know the word enharmonic. That happens most often at key changes, because a lot of time at a key change there's a common tone that stays from one key to the next. And so, but if you're changing from flats to sharps, you've got to switch that. Well, it's confusing looking at as a singer, because you're singing a G flat that now becomes an F sharp, and you think you need to change the pitch. It's the exact same pitch in singing. So that's called enharmonic. We've talked about double sharps. There is such a thing as double flats, and they literally write 2 flats. And it means it goes down 2 half steps. If you have a flat tire, your car goes down. Flats go down, sharps go up. Don't forget it. That comes back to haunt you in a minute. Let's keep going. Double sharp. And the natural sign. I have a question about this because your book says that a natural sign cancels accidentals to the white note. I question that. And sometimes that's an editorial thing. If you have a double sharp and there's one accidental within the same measure of that, my understanding was always that it canceled one of the sharps, bringing it back to only the plain F sharp instead of the double sharp. I think that's editorial. I think I've seen it both ways, but I think that's something that you have to consider in looking at that. Only I would cancel it, question that. If an accidental, a sharp or flat, is in the key signature, which is at the beginning of each staff, it remains sharp or flat throughout the piece, period, unless there's an accidental. I mean a natural sign. If an accidental, sharp or flat, is indicated beside an individual note within the piece, it remains altered throughout that particular measure only. Throughout that particular measure only. The written in accidental goes away once you change measures. If a tie with an accidental happens and it crosses the bar line, holy moly, you keep the accidental going through the tie. Just a little bit of confusion there, but that's the rule. So remember that. By the way, when you describe a note with words that has an accidental, you say the letter name and then the accidental, F sharp. That's how we speak, F sharp. But when you draw a note or read a note on the staff, the accidental precedes the note. So it would be written, let me find one. Here, I would write, I'll tell you to put an F sharp there. So that you say F sharp. But when I write it on the staff, the sharp comes first, then the F comes next. Do you see that? Know that. The reason I say that's important for you to note is that there are times when 16th notes or 36th notes are close together and they're neighbor notes and it's hard to see what's going on. There are times that I've had people say, well, the sharp's right between those 2 notes. Is it this one sharped or is that one sharped? Well, the accidental precedes the written note on the score. Please know that. Save a question for me. Today we're going to study major scales. The text begins the discussion on major scales on page 69 by having you sing. You all know, right? I hope so. Guess what you're singing in that song? A major scale. You got it? That's your major scale. You already know that. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Sing it backwards. It's in the song. You're in good shape. You're actually singing that major scale. Having a good understanding of just how scales are built will help your sight singing. A major scale is made up of 8 consecutive notes, 8 consecutive letter names in a prescribed pattern of whole steps and half. I'm going to say that again. 8 consecutive notes and 8 consecutive letter names. Sometimes that's where you get in trouble with these double sharps and double flats, because you have to keep the letters consecutive in order to keep it grammatically correct. To construct a major scale, I'm going to say select a beginning note, or what we call a tonic. Then create 2 tetrachords. Tetrachord is Greek for 4 notes. Tetra must mean 4 in Greek. You can prove that to me, but I can't prove it to you. But I know that a tetrachord is Greek, and then it means 4 notes, and there's a specific pattern that you're going to memorize right now. We're going to create 2 identical tetrachords. The second one is exactly as the first, and we're going to connect these 2 tetrachords with a whole step. Now, I've tried to draw this out for you to see. I think this is the easiest way that I can explain a major scale to you. And it goes on to explain the circle of fifths and tuning and everything else. I think if you could just learn this. A scale has to have a beginning note. Any note on the piano will do. You can start a scale on any note on the piano and use this pattern. Here's your starting note. You now know what the difference in a whole step and a half step is, correct? You go up to the top of the keyboard and think the closest note is a half. So 2 halves equal a whole. So your starting note, up a whole step, there's that note. Up a whole step, there's that note. And then a half step, and there's that note. Now, if we're doing this on C, you'll start on C, a whole step to D, a whole step to E, a half step to F. Now we're going to skip this right now. We're going to start on G and start the second tetrachord. Do the exact same pattern. Start on G, a whole step to A, a whole step to B, and a half step to C. So these 2 tetrachords are absolutely identical in the intervallic difference of the pitches. You have to connect these 2 tetrachords together with a whole step. You see what I just did? Now what I want you to do at home this week is to start on any note on the piano. You don't even have to know what note you're starting on, probably. Start on any note of the piano, have a starting note, go up a whole step, and a half step. Connect with a whole step and start your second tetrachord. Whole step, half step. That is a major scale. That is all you have to know about how to construct a major scale. It can be built on any note by using that pattern. The pattern of whole and half steps in major scales, and hear this, does require accidentals, creating key signatures. Because you're starting in a different spot, you're going to end up with different black notes in order to keep this pattern going, okay? And so it requires accidentals in a key signature for every major scale except C. Page 73 of your text explains that the key signature of a piece tells where the sharps or flats occur in that key. This keeps editors from using accidentals by each and every sharp or flat in a piece. The key signature is listed at the beginning of each grand staff, on each staff. So you can always refer back to it when you're in the middle of a piece. It's right there. You don't have to go back to the first page. It's always there for you. I hope you will take time to try building this major scale. And then play it as a whole, da 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 da, whatever. If it sounds like the sound of music, you're good. If it doesn't sound like the sound of music, start over and double check your tetrachords. Now, we're going to go into the circle of fifths. This is, I think, a fascinating part of music theory. The interval, and I'm probably skipping ahead, but the interval of a fifth is probably the most important interval in music theory. Not the octave, but the fifth. Octave's probably second. But the perfect fifth is so vitally important. Do you see that because if we're naming these scale degrees, and we'll get into that later over here, but this is the first note of the scale, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, and the eighth. So we're going up to the fifth note to start the second tetrachord, correct? Because you've got this whole step connecting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is important. So when we play a scale, when I teach little kiddie scales, I say use no thumbs. Because remember I said there are 8 notes in a major scale? So 4 and 4. Completely divided by the tetrachords. Do you hear that? There's one tetrachord. Here's the other tetrachord, and that's how they're connected by the whole. Now what I showed you here, or trying to illustrate, is that if we start on the fifth note of the scale, the interval of 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're going to start on the second tetrachord, which has got the same pattern we already need for the beginning of the next scale. We're going to go to a G scale. So now I'm going to take my left hand, put it on top of my right hand, which is already in whole step, half pattern, my whole step connector, and then add the next tetrachord. So now I've created a G major scale. But you see I had to have one black note in that in order to get that whole step and the half going into G. Do you see that? In order to get from E to F sharp is a whole step, F sharp to G is your half. So we're now at a G scale. If I repeat that same process, I'm going to start with the second tetrachord or the fifth note of the scale, and I'll begin on D, and the first tetrachord is, you keep the sharp that you've already had, D, E, F sharp, G, the whole step, A, B, to get that C sharp, D. Now there's several things that you need to see in this. Do you see a pattern at all? Do you see that you're adding, every time you add, go up to the next scale, you're adding a sharp. Every time you go up to the next scale, the next to the last note is the sharp you're adding. Do you see that? Okay. So you should have a number 5 handout that has some form of the circle of fifths. I have to brag about my friend Nancy Calfee, who's an artist, and she painted this gorgeous circle of fifths for me. I hope you can see it clearly. Because what it does, in writing, it describes what we've just talked about. C has no sharps or flats. We go up to the fifth note of C, which is G. We start a scale with a pattern of the 2 tetrachords. On G, it's going to have 1 sharp. We go up to the second tetrachord, begin the next scale, and it will begin on D, and it will have 2 sharps. We'll go up to the next scale, and A, and so on, until you get up to 6 and 7 sharps, and then it starts flipping to flats, and you subtract the flats. Or you can even go backwards here and go down this side a fifth, and you're adding flats. It creates an incredible tool. The other thing that I need you to understand, and I might be skipping beyond myself a little bit here, but that's okay. If I repeat myself, you'll just learn it more. Look at this pattern. I just find this fascinating. Okay, the major scales create this big ring. We'll talk about minor scales next week. The big ring is the major scales. You see 1 sharp, 2 sharp, 3 sharp, 4 sharp, 5 sharp, 6 sharps, 7 sharps. When you get to 6, you've got 6 sharps and 6 flats. That's where you get into the enharmonic notes. Remember the word enharmonic? Same note, same pitch, different name. But remember that you have to keep your alphabet in order. So if you're starting on F sharp, it's F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp. If you're starting on G flat, it's G flat, I have to think what's the last one, G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, E flat, F, G flat. So each one of those has one note that's not accidental because you're only at 6 right here. But do you see, every one of those notes had a different name, but I had to keep the musical alphabet intact. That's where you get into a whole lot of enharmonic notating. So I want you to understand that. There's one more thing I want to show you about this circle of fifths that I find fascinating. Well, maybe there's 2 things. One is we identified in the G scale that we needed an F sharp in order to keep our pattern of whole steps and half steps correct. F sharp. Well, that's kind of two things back, okay? We indicated in the D scale that we needed 2 sharps. It was, look, F and C, F and C. Look, F and C. We haven't indicated, but I'll tell you a secret. In 3 sharps, you add a G, F, F, C, G. 4 sharps, you add a D, F, C, G, D. 5 sharps, you added, you're going around the circle of fifths in another area. The order of sharps is up a fifth. Sharps go up, remember? Sit on top of sharp, you go up. If I put you on the piano and said, you know that F sharp's the first sharp, you would go up a fifth. F, up 5, to C sharp, G sharp, to D sharp. It goes all the way up by that circle of fifths. If you're doing flats, they go down by 5. B, down to E, down to A, down to D, down to G, down to C, down to F. Right here, I wrote this out for you. F sharp, C, G, D. But look, that's going up those same letters that we did on the circle of fifths when we were adding. The other thing that is noticed is that the order of flats is actually opposite of the order of sharps. B, E, I'm going to mess up my fingers, A, D, G, C, F. They're exact opposites, all fifths. Flats go down a fifth, sharps go up a fifth. Know that. It's easy to figure out if you know that, instead of just trying to memorize. They always are added in that order. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about temperament. A lot of this information I took from a book called First Time Bars. It's another book that will be referenced at the end of these classes because it's another good book for you to read. Medieval music used temperament, a system of tuning based on fifths. Here we go again on that fifth, and attributed to the Greek philosopher and mathematician from the 6th century BC. 6th century BC, Pythagoras. The idea that you pick up a starting point, say C, and tune the interval C to G. There's that fifth. He tuned fifths. What we already know, if you pick up that interval, start this, and tune it up a fifth, you get to G. If you take G and tune it up a fifth, you get to D. Remember, as part of our tetrachord. D, tune it up a fifth, you get to A. You'll go around all 12 tones by tuning it up a fifth, which is what Pythagoras figured out and actually did. Let's see. I've already said that. When you went up a fifth, you were creating a ratio of 3:2 to tune that fifth. Then you use that top note and keep going. As we've seen, you keep going all the way around, creating the idea of the circle of fifths. Some sources give Pythagoras credit for inventing the circle of fifths, but there is no proof of this claim. However, he was very interested in the theoretical science of harmonics and is credited with a system of tuning based on the fifths. I'm going to tell you this little aside and then I'll come back to Mr. Pythagoras. One thing he did discover that I think is amazing, and I guess I knew this for 100 years, but it's something that I don't think I realized he was 6th century BC. That's a long time ago. If you take a string and have a certain tension on it, if you double the length of that string exactly and have the same tension on it, you will create an octave lower. If you take this string and cut that string in half, same tension, you've got to keep the same tension. This string and this string, the short string will be an octave higher than the first. And he figured that out. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, they had lutes and harps and stuff, didn't they? So I guess they used all of this in Old Testament times. I find that very interesting. Now here's the bad news. Unfortunate though, when Pythagoras' tuning got all the way back around, and I'm gonna back away from C because I'm gonna get you into A 440 hertz because that's where we tune, the orchestra tunes to A. You start tuning a piano to A. You know, you use the tuning fork to A. In fact, that's what really helped clarify this. But anyway, when you start at A 440 and do the Pythagorean up the fifth and tuning 3:2 ratio, you end off just a little bit. You end up, when you get all the way back to the next octave, you're off just slightly. You should end up at, if we start at 440, the octave higher should be 880 hertz, but it's not 880, it's 892, which makes it a little bit sharp, but you're talking about 890. So you're talking about 12 little degrees off of what it should be, but it still makes a difference. Even worse, your fifths would sound very great. Your tuned fifths would sound fabulous, but sometimes the intervals in between Mr. Pythagoras' ideas were distinctly off color and created beating effect. You know, when you hear someone tune a piano or tune a pipe organ, you hear when they get right into it, it goes from and you hear these harmonics created. So anyway, Pythagoras was certainly on the right road, but clearly we needed another solution. Various other temperaments have been suggested over time, each with their own advantages and disadvantages. Even to this date, there is no perfect answer for temperament. It's still not, they don't have it perfect. And I can tell you this number because I read it, not because I totally understand it, but in our current equal temperament system, the ratio between adjacent semitones is always the same. I know that. We sang the chromatic scale a minute ago. but here's where I'm lost. It's the 12th root of 2. If you're interested, you write it out and teach me. I'd love to know about that. But so if A is 440, E comes out to be 659 hertz. And Pythagorean tuning had 660 hertz. So you're only 1 off on the 5th. Anyway, I find it fascinating that we still haven't mastered this. I will tell you this, that Bach in his day, he was 1685 to 1750, wrote a whole series of clavier pieces called the Well-Tempered Clavier, because they were working on a new system after the Pythagorean system. For singers, this is more than just theoretical stuff. 16th century madrigals, for example, were written with a specific temperament in mind, and they just don't sound the same when sung with equal temperament. Some intervals that sounded dissonant in equal temperament would have sounded consonant then, and vice versa. This tells me that there's a reason that most Renaissance music needs to be sung a cappella, because singers have the ability to fine-tune. String players have the ability to fine-tune. Pianists don't have that ability. When you accompany a Renaissance piece with a piano, you're causing some intervals to sound a little bit out of tune. So we'll be on that one, won't we? The temperament that's generally used today is called equal temperament, but it's comparatively a recent development and mathematically quite advanced. You may be surprised to learn that it really wasn't possible to tune keyboard instruments accurately using this temperament until the invention of the tuning fork in 1834. As we have seen, the interval between a note and the next one with the same name is called an octave. In terms of sound waves, the upper note has a frequency exactly twice that of the lower. Like I told you, that Pythagoras, his idea still reigns on this. This makes an octave so constant that the ear perceives the two notes as almost the same. I'll tell you a little secret, and I got to quit getting off these asides, but when you listen to organ music, the basic organ pipe is tuned to 8. And then if you look at the stops, they have some that have a 4 on them. That means it's an octave higher. You add that 4. They have some that have a 2 on them. That's another octave higher. So you're adding the basic note, an octave higher, and the second octave higher. And it sounds like one note when you put them together, because the octave, if it's tuned correctly, will unify itself and almost create a chain of sound that gives resonance all the way to the top. It actually creates the harmonic series, which is a whole lesson, which we won't get into, but it creates that kind of sonority. Okay, here's your shortcut to major key signatures. Pull out handout number 6. This is a cheat, but I think it's worth noting. If the key signature has sharps in it, take the last sharp, count up a half step. If the key signature has sharps in it, say it has 3 sharps. Here we are, here's the sharps. Remember, you go up a 5th, F, C, and G. The key signature has 3 sharps. You take the last sharp, G sharp, count up a half step. What comes after G sharp? A half step, A. The scale of A has 3 sharps. If you take the scale of, a key signature that has 5, F, C, G, D, A. A sharp, go up a half step. The scale of B has 5 sharps. Now, I asked you a little while back to build a scale on any note. I want you to take that knowledge, start on any note, build your scale, and see if you come up with the same number of sharps that this chart tells you. Or that you can figure out, well, I have 4 sharps, F, C, G, D. This scale should be an E scale. If it's not an E scale, you've done something wrong. Get to work again. With flats, the trick is different. It's too bad it's not the same. But it's just as easy. You just have to keep them straight. The next to the last flat in the key signature is the home tone, is the tonic of the scale. So if you have 3 flats in a scale, B, E, and A flat, the next to the last flat is E flat. The trick is you got to remember it's not E, it's E flat. But it's the next to the last flat. It's just that simple. There are 2 exceptions to this rule, and that is that you have to memorize two, and they're the easiest ones. We start with C major all the time because it's easy to think about. It's all white notes in this pattern. So there is no next to the last sharp, the next to the last flat or the last sharp. You don't have any accidentals. So you just know that C has nothing. And the scale of F has only one flat. But remember the flats, you have to have the next to the last. There's no next to the last. C has nothing, F has one flat. The rest you have this little trick for. Learn it, okay? Good. You have heard me refer to the dominant or the fifth degree. You've heard me refer to the tonic or the first degree. I want you to learn these positions. We'll talk more about these next week when we talk about chords. And this is the chord part of this. But in a major scale, every note has a name. Every degree of the scale, I should say, has a name. Tonic is the home tone. It's the number 1. And then you have the octave down here, which is the same as the tonic, an octave higher. The second one is called the supertonic. Oh, there's a P right there, supertonic. It's just above the tonic. Now here's where I think it's interesting, and I'll tell you what I had to learn. The median is a third higher than the tonic. The submedian is a third lower than the tonic. Okay? I always thought the median was called the median because it was the middle of the number, the keynote chord of a scale. C, E, G, or 1, 3, 5. But either way you think, it's the median is the third above, but where the submedian comes in is a third below that tonic. But that's easy to remember. Dominant has the same pattern. We've talked about number 5 being our dominant note, our dominant interval. Dominant is 5 above the tonic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again. Subdominant, I think of sub being lower, so I thought subdominant was just under the dominant. But the truth is, you're supposed to think about this with a subdominant being 5 notes below the tonic, which also makes it the 4th degree of the scale. You need to memorize these. Leading tone is just called the leading tone because it leads back home to the tonic. It leads back home to the tonic. And you will hear me telling you in choral singing to sharpen that leading tone in order to get it to push us back into the home tone. Enough of that. I'd like to move on to some ear training. There are two, one of the reasons I chose this book is that there are two ideas or methods to help you with learning to sight read. One is the 1, 2, 3 method, and one is the interval method. Today we're going to talk about the 1, 2, 3 method, and we're going to stay in major scales. I'm going to ask you to look at your packet number 7, or look at page 79 of your text, and we're going to sight sing some of these exercises. Now the book tells you to sing them en la. The book tells you to sing them en la, but I want you to use the number names. And I'm going to begin with a little exercise that I think is fun that you may want to throw something at me. You got to work on this at home because when the chorus finally gets together, I'm going to test you. I do this with my children's choir, and they can do it better than I can. Are you ready? Listen, it goes 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. I want you to do that at home, okay? The next step of that is to then omit one note. Are you ready? So get ready to stomp. So you're going to go 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 4, 2, 1, 1, 2, 4, 5, 4, 2, 1, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4, 2, 1, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 5, 4, 2, 1, 1, 2, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 2, 1. Yes, well that's just fun, and I'm really good up until there. The next step is to clap on 5. Now, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 4, 2, 1, 1, 2, 4, 4, 2, 1, 1, 2, 4, 6, 4, 2, 1. I am slowing down. But that's your job to work on this. I can't tell you how invaluable that is. Then try to do it on 3. What you're actually learning is a major scale by skipping a note. And it's making you think about where in the scale that pitch is. Get to work. It's a challenge. You can do this. Where am I? Sight singing exercises. I want to do these. I'm going to sing the numbers for you the first time. I have a couple of helpers here that were brave enough to come sit through my boring lectures with me. I love them. And then the second time I'm going to play it, and I want you to try to sing the numbers, the scale degree numbers. And then I'm going to give you time to try to sing it alone. Or maybe if I'm pushing time, I'll just let you do that at home by yourself. So here we go. The nice thing about this book is it gives you number 1. It tells you where the tonic note is. And we're only in this very beginning part. The book suggests that you sing 1, think about 2, and then sing 3. 1, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3. That's sort of like the same exercise I had you do in that funny little thing. I think mine's more fun than this, but that's okay. So right now, I want you to try, or listen to me. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1. Now I want you at home to try that, looking at that. And I'm not going to sing with you. You're on your own. I will play for you just to be a nice lady. Now I want you to try to sing it by yourself. Ready? Go. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1. Now I let my little helpers help you that time, but on the next one, they're not going to help you. You have to do it by yourself. The next one, the first thing you should look at is the time signature. There's a C at letter B, the B exercise. There's a C, which means common time. Remember? 4/4 time. The quarter note's getting 1. You have some half notes in this, but that's easy. The next thing to look at, we're in the treble clef, and we have 3 flats. What is the next to the last flat? B flat, E flat, A flat. We're in the key of E flat. So the first thing I would tell you to do is go 1, 2, 3, 4. At least sing 5 notes of the major scale and get this in your head. Get that scale. You're starting on 1. 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 2, 1. Now I'm going to play it and let people try to do it by themselves. I'll help you with the keyboard. Ready and go. Now I'm going to give you some silent time to try it yourself. Ready? Go. Exercise number C, letter C. We're the bass clef now, and we have 2 sharps. What are the 2 sharps? F and C. You take the last sharp, go up a half step, we're in the key of D. So we need these 2 sharps. There's your D scale. So D is your number 1. So listen. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1. You're on your own. Ready? Everybody sing this. Ready and go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1. Exercise D, 2 flats, bass clef, cut time. Cut time, 2, 2. 2 flats, B flat, E flat. You're in the key of B flat major in the bass clef. Number 1 is by that first B flat in the bass clef. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 1. Try it without me singing. Ready and go.
1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 2, 3.
Now try it on your own. Ready and go. The next exercise is E. It's treble clef, 3/8 time. So the eighth note gets 1 beat, and there are 3 pulses per measure. It begins on 3 this time instead of beginning on 1. They give you this nice little hint. There's nothing in the key signature, which means we're in the key of C major. So here we go. There's your 3. Ready? Listen. Help me if you will. 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. Try it by yourself. I'll play. Let's look at the next group. This is working on the interval of a fourth. 1, 4, 1. Can you think? 1, 2, 3, 4. Try it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. You might want to work on that a little bit before. We're going to start at exercise A. We're going to do this, and then we'll be just about done. At A, I'm going to count up. We have 1 flat, so we're in the key in the scale of F in the treble clef. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 2. 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4. 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1. All right? I'm going to let you try it. Ready? I'll play. No singing. Ready? And. Do it by yourself and listen. I'd like to do one more. We'll catch up with these. We'll do some of these every week in class. So keep this book with you when you come to every class. But let's do the next one because I want to add something to this one. If we look at number B, letter B, excuse me, I want to count sing this before we do anything. So before we even consider that it's in the bass clef and it has 2 flats, I want to count sing. We're going to subdivide into 8th notes. No pitch, just count sing. With me. 1, 2, 3. 1 and 2, 3. 1 and 2, 3. 1 and 2, 3. 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2, 3. 1 and 2, 3. 1 and 2, 3. And you can hold that. Good. So you understand the rhythm somewhat. This has 2 flats. The next to the last flat would be B flat. We're in the scale of B flat, so I will play it with the 2 flats. We're going to start on the third note of that scale. So it's 3, 4, 3, 1, 3, 4, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's try it again. I'll just play it. You folks can sing it for them. Ready? And go. 3, 4, 3, 1, 3, 4, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2. Do you see how much easier it was because you weren't thinking about the rhythm? You were only thinking about the notes that time. The rhythm kind of fell into place. We will continue with this, and I ask you to work on this some at home. There's one more thing I want to show you because I can't wait to show it to you. Turn to page 85 in your book or look at the end of this number 7 handout. It's on the last page. It looks like page 85. There are 7 steps to sight reading in this method, and I want you to think about it. It says step 1, determine the key, which we were doing in our sight reading. And then I was making sure that you understood what key you were in and how many accidentals you had, correct? Step number 2, spell out the key under the degree numbers of the scale. You'll see on your handout that step number 2 has F, G, A, finger number 1 degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, with the exact letter names of the F scale. You see they even put a little smiley face under the half steps for you. Step number 3, tap out the rhythm and say, I'm going to say, on count singing, I don't want la, I want 1 and 2. When you pick up a piece of music, I want you to count sing before you ever begin to sing a pitch. This is something I've never seen done. Step 4, using the pattern of step 2, which is your major scale, locate all of the degrees of the scale on the staff. You see the tiny little numbers over by the 4/4. It's drawing a number on the line or space where the scale degrees are located. Put those in your score of the piece you're sight reading. Number 5, play one on your instrument, or at least find one, and then I would say sing a major scale so that you can hear the major tonality. Then it says, sing the melody on La. I want you to try to sing the melody on the degree numbers. I think it will help you more. I'm not saying that La doesn't count, it does count, but in the big picture, being able to sing the degree numbers is more beneficial. Then it says sing the melody with the words, paying attention to tempo and dynamic markings. Pull out a score and do that this week. That's what I wanted to tell you. Here we go. I'm going to talk to you about next week. If you learned everything today, you might have learned some things that you can teach me about. Let me know. I want to go back, if I can, find to what I want you to do for next week. Hang on just a second. Well, maybe I can't go back to what, here it is. Next week, we will study minor scales, the 3 minor scales, natural minor, harmonic minor, melodic minor. We'll go into modes, including the pentatonic scale and whole tone scale. We'll talk and memorize some intervals. We'll look at chords and how they function as melodic lines and how they function as chords and their inversions. Handouts that you need next week are number 8, scale degrees and chord structure, number 9, intervals and sight singing, and number 10, cadences. I need you to bring your book as well. I miss you. I miss the music. Have a great week.